Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic: Experience the Wild Side of China. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Eddy Savage. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all for being here with us today. Take it away, Eddy.
Well, thank you, Rob, for that great introduction. And hello, everybody. My name is Eddy Savage, an expedition leader with Natural Habitat Adventure and also a photo expedition leader with Natural Habitat Adventures. And today, I'm very excited to talk about a spectacular trip that I will be departing on, and it's a little over a month now. It is the Wild Side of China, a nature odyssey. This presentation, my goal is to cover a little bit, a lot of both expeditions, both in the nature journey as well as the photo expedition. So if you're here for one or the other, that's great. I have lots of good information to share with you. Perfect. So let's get started. Gotta click this button here. There we go. Oh, there I am. Hey, so that's me. That's Lily. That's my partner Candace. And I guess I'm on a webcam so you can see who I am. And then there's a giant panda. Since I've been working with NatHab since 2016, I started with their polar bear expeditions up in Churchill, Manitoba. And since then, I've been leading expeditions in Churchill for Northern Lights, Churchill Summer, as well as the polar bear trips. China, I started doing the China trips in 2017, and I had a little bit of a hiatus until last year when uh, I was able to go back in the springtime, and I'm so excited to be able to go back this springtime as well. Other trips that I run with NatHab, maybe you've seen me there before. Um, I do the Iceland photo trip as well as the Greenland base camp and Haida Gwaii. So very, very excited to be out there with you. And just as a quick note, I've just published a book on wild bears of Canada, if you're interested. And okay, so diving into China, this is an opportunity for me to share with you that one of the ways that this trip works is our extraordinary team on the ground in China. So our local partners, you can see Philip on the right-hand side there holding the big camera. Ma is a ranger. You're not necessarily going to meet these people, but they're kind of working behind the scenes to make sure that this trip runs as smoothly as possible. And Bella, who I'm 99% sure I'm working with this spring. And then Shay, as well as some folks enjoying a break after visiting a market in one of the cities that we visit along the way. But our China team works day in, day out to make this itinerary as smooth as possible in a place where it's not always especially because of kind of how far afield we go on this expedition, it's not always the smoothest travels to get us into the backcountry where we need to be. So extraordinary people, naturalists, adventurers, travel specialists. They're extremely wonderful people to work with, and I know that they've got all our backs when we're over there. So very excited to see the team again once we head over there. So I'm going to start with kind of an overview of the itinerary and talk about the different places that we're going to. And then once I've done the overview of the itinerary, I'll dive into a bit more information about some specifics, the finer details of the trip and some things you should think about. But this trip, of course, it starts in China, in Xi'an. That's where our welcome dinner is going to be. We'll be staying at the Shangri-La Hotel in Xi'an, the ancient capital of China, some 8 to 10 million people in the vicinity, and it is as the ancient capital. It's where many emperors and important people have been buried, as well as there's some really spectacular feats of architecture and earth movement via the city wall that encompasses the old town, as well as the lesser pagoda and giant or lesser wild goose pagoda and giant wild goose pagoda, among other things in the city. So it's a very interesting place to start the trip. But what it does for us is it kind of gets us situated so that we are hopping distance to the Terracotta Army. And so the Terracotta Army, we are going to be spending a half day exploring the sites, learning about these extraordinary archaeological features. The the Terracotta Army, they're finding more and more about the scale of this, but it was basically um, compacted earth or terra firma, not quite a clay, very close to that was molded and shaped into these soldiers that there's thousands of them that were buried, or they were basically kind of uh, put into a buried facility, and supposedly they were supposed to be hidden away and protect the Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi in his afterlife, after he passed away. But the site is extraordinary. It was lost for 2,000 years and rediscovered in the 1970s. And the way that we visit the Terracotta Army is so that we're there right first thing in the morning. We leave the hotel early. We get there right when the site opens, and that gives us the opportunity to explore the Terracotta Army without crowds, at least for a little while. And then by the time we're leaving, it's going to be a little bit more compact. In particular, I'm just going to go back to the slide here. Uh, One of the other things that we're going to do in Xi'an is see a little bit of the city with the rest of our day, and the location that we're going to very much depends on the day, and we'll talk to you about that when we are in the city together. There we go. So following our time in Xi'an, we are going to start making our way out of the ancient capital, and we're going to take a bullet train, some 155-mile-an-hour transportation. We'll jump on that, and we are going to go right underneath actually one giant panda subpopulation, which is in the Minshan Mountains. And we're going to get off that train somewhere around Guangyuan, which you can see on the map there, where we just tuck into Sichuan province. And we'll be on the train for about 3 hours. And from there, we're going to transfer onto a bus, and we're going to, put an arrow in there, easy to find. And from there, we're going to transfer onto a bus, and we're going to head into the mountains. So from Guangyuan, depending on which roads are open, we might take a faster road or a slower road, but we'll get in there, and we're going to what's called the Giant Panda Nature Reserve. Now, when we're talking about giant panda habitat, this is directly from the IUCN Red List website, and it's kind of a plotted map of where all giant panda nature reserves are, and well, all giant panda habitat is, but basically all giant panda habitat, almost all of it, is protected by nature reserves. So it looks like this, and there's really not a whole lot of it. And if we were to kind of try to connect all of this together, it might be 3 to 4 times the size of Yellowstone National Park. And that is where all wild giant pandas are living. So that's very interesting. Where we're going to be going is somewhere in this vicinity here. We're going to be going to Tangjahe and the Wild Panda Nature Reserve there, and we'll be spending 2 nights there, but and a good 2 full days exploring the place. There's a couple of different valleys with a variety of different walks that we'll check out, but it is one of the 67 giant panda nature reserves. And it is unlikely for us to see a giant panda in the wild, more likely for us to potentially see evidence of them. It is the springtime, and so breeding for giant pandas is kicking off, which means that we might, if we're extremely lucky, hear some bleating, which is the sound that female giant pandas make when they're right around their fertile window, their annual fertile window of 18 to 36 hours. So we will be going for lots of walks. We'll be looking for lots of different types of wildlife and checking out different scenery. whether or not we find evidence, see one, it's completely random, but it's not very likely to see a wild one. Unfortunately, they are so rare. In the entire world, the wild population is 1,864 as per the last count. That number may have gone up or may have gone down in the last little while, as the most recent giant panda census is coming up to around 10 years old. There's a nice little map of the existing giant panda nature reserves. And so when we're in the Giant Panda Nature Reserve, like I was saying, we're going to go for a number of walks. There's a variety of trails. Some of it will just be walking on older kind of somewhat maintained access roads. Some of it is well maintained trails. But the Giant Panda Nature Reserve, if it's not giant pandas that we're going to find, we are very likely to come across this type of animal. And if you don't know what this is what's called a golden takin, or a Szechuan takin. There's two subspecies of takin, at least in this area, and we're kind of right on the edge between the golden takin and the Szechuan takin. So we get some that are very golden, some that are more blonde. But it's pretty spectacular to come across this animal. If you're wondering, hey, how big is this? This is an adult male, and it's likely around 1,000 pounds. It's a pretty extraordinary creature that is dubbed a goat antelope, and the Giant Panda Nature Reserve we visit is one of the strongholds for these animals. It's estimated there's somewhere around 1,000 takin within the nature reserve. So very good opportunities for us to come across these creatures. Very cool. As well, there's a couple of troops of Tibetan macaques, and the Tibetan macaques are kind of sporadic. Sometimes we'll see them down in the rivers getting some water. Sometimes we'll just kind of be walking down the road or driving down the road, and suddenly we'll see a whole troop cross the road in front of us. Highly variable, but there's a really strong population of Tibetan macaques within the nature reserve that we'll have lots of opportunity to see. Fingers crossed. Of course, wildlife is wildlife. And it's also a great place for golden pheasants. So springtime is the breeding time. It's mating for these golden pheasants, and so there is a possibility that we might come across some courtship between these birds. But really, again, with golden pheasants, however spectacular they are, their favorite place to hang out is in bamboo thickets or in shrubs. And so we could hear them all day long and know that there's one somewhere, but unless it decides to come out in the open, kind of blindly in pursuit of a mate, then it is very difficult to see these birds in the wild. But we're going to make every effort to do so because golden pheasants are so spectacular. And this isn't the only habitat that we'll be in where these birds might be. So we could get lucky elsewhere as well. And then throughout the park, there's lots of other species. This is a Chinese goral. There's also Chinese serow. We have in the past a couple of years, we've come across some golden eagles. There's quite a variety of other raptors as well, some interesting fish owls and stuff like that. So we'll basically have our eyes peeled for anything and anything, everything and anything. And then if we're really lucky, there's also Asiatic black bears or moon bears that find core habitat in the Giant Panda Nature Reserve that we're visiting. And so if we don't see one coming down to the river to take a drink, like one group was so lucky enough to see, we may see evidence of them in the trees as they break branches as they're feeding on the different fruits or nuts, and then basically pile them up underneath them. But this time of year, one of the great things about going in the spring is, there are leaves on the trees, but it's not like the thickest, luscious, densest foliage coverage. So we're able to see kind of through most of the forest, and if there is something moving around or there is something sitting in the tree, it's not super well camouflaged at this time of year, so they're easier to spot. So that's definitely a benefit of the springtime activity. And then once we are finished with our time at uh, the Giant Panda Nature Reserve, which is just a special few days, we are going to transfer to the town of Pingwu, which I believe they've dubbed themselves a giant panda, or the county, or the county town with the most wild giant pandas within their boundaries. Um, there's just a lot of giant panda nature reserves in the vicinity, one of which we will be visiting. But there is a semi-habituated group of golden snub-nosed monkeys that we're going to visit, and it's a bit of a drive, deep down big river valley, a big kind of U-shaped river valley, and then we're going to make a walk up into the area where these golden snub-nosed monkeys are, and we'll have a good amount of time to observe them. The troop size the last time I was there was, I think it was around 50 animals. It might be more, it might be less, depends on how their winter was. But it was pretty spectacular to see those monkeys up close and personal. Really great photography opportunities. There's a young one. Something really special about these golden snub-nosed monkeys. They're one of many endangered or vulnerable species on this trip that we see in these nature reserves and forays into kind of this wilderness. And the golden snub-nosed monkey, there's somewhere around 10 to 12,000 left on the planet. They are endangered. They share similar habitat to giant pandas, a little bit more versatile, but still there's not so many of them um, around. So it's very special to get to see them in the wild. They've got kind of these blue faces, orange fur. Some of the adult males will have long golden guard hairs on their back, and they're just kind of a really unique and special primate to observe. There's some young ones wrestling for the highest top on the tree. And there's one of the adult males with the golden guard hairs. So once we have finished our time exploring around Pingwu and the golden snub-nosed monkey area, we are going to head out of the mountains and to the edge of the lowlands, and basically like right at the edge of the Chonglai mountain range. And we have kind of a list of giant panda breeding and research bases that we're going to tackle. And this is our opportunity to get really up close and personal with the giant pandas. These giant panda breeding and research bases, some of them house a couple dozen, some of them house over 100 giant pandas. It's all part of there's nowhere else in the world quite like this, where you have such a dedicated team focused on basically learning about pandas, housing pandas. They Most of these bases got their start back in the 1970s, when in the mountains around like the Chonglai and the Minshan Mountains, there was a large bamboo flowering event where all of the bamboo died, and so you had hundreds of pandas that were basically starving or not able to find enough resources. And as we learn more about pandas, we can talk through this, but they because of their bamboo diet, they don't have reserves like the black bear, polar bear, or grizzly bear in North America, where they can, stack up 20-40% of their body weight by eating high fat, high protein foods. The giant panda eats bamboo, and what that ends up meaning is, if they don't eat bamboo for 3 or 4 days, they could be on the brink of starvation. Whereas a polar bear coming off the sea ice in the summer won't eat for 6 months and be fine. So it's a big difference. And so, anyways, when there's this large bamboo flowering event, these pandas came down. Some pandas came down from the mountains, or started kind of being more visible to some of the villagers, the locals that lived in their habitat range, and those some of those pandas that were basically starving or on the brink of death were then rescued and housed in temporary shelters and eventually turning into the giant panda breeding and research base. Additionally, at the same time, there was some research and population counts that were talking about giant panda um, population numbers, and we're looking at there was an estimate from the 70s and early 80s that there could have been between 900 and 1,000 pandas left in the wild, and there was not a lot of protections for them at the time. There was some poaching going on. There was a lot of habitat degradation. There was still a lot of logging going on up in some of the kind of pristine bamboo habitat or bamboo forest habitat, taking out some of the big old growth trees, and so that all got put to a stop right around the same time that the flowering event happened. And so there was this huge push, a huge amount of resources put towards protecting the giant pandas. And one of the initial goals of the projects was to basically through some of these rescues, but also some, like even since then, there's been smaller scale bamboo flowering events or pandas that have come down from the mountains. But there's been a trickle of bears from the wild into these facilities over the last 40 or 50 years, but lots of breeding going on, artificial insemination and captive breeding programs. And one of the initial goals was to get the giant panda population up over 300 in captivity in China, and that goal was met. But there's still going to be adding more bears to the population, so there is still lots of captive breeding. But the idea being that if they could hit that 300 threshold, then even if all wild pandas disappeared, if there was something that happened in their habitat or they couldn't prevent some of the population from fizzling out, excuse me, they would be able to they would still be able to have a viable population, a genetically viable population of polar bears giant pandas with over 300 captive pandas. So they've met that goal. And now one of the big things that they're working on at these giant panda breeding and research bases, this is from a bit of a panda kindergarten there, where you have 1-year-old pandas feeding on bamboo. Now what they're working on is reintroduction and taking giant pandas that were born in captivity and training them and teaching them to live in the wild, so that some of the smaller population units of giant pandas that have been fragmented or separated from other units, they could have 5 to 10 bears. If they can have a captive born panda reintroduced, it can basically add another individual, but also kind of mix up the genetics in that unit so that it doesn't fizzle out in the next 20 or 30 years. So that's a big source of or a big kind of focus of some of the giant panda breeding and research bases. That's pretty cool. As well, some of them have red pandas. The Dujiangyan panda base in general has a very interesting red panda area, as well as a moon bear. And when we're at the Dujiangyan Panda Base, we will also have the opportunity to take part in a volunteer program. So you'll see when you're at these facilities that they're cleaning the panda enclosures regularly, multiple times per day, and all of the animals all of the bears are under extremely watchful care. Which is really, really good to see. So we get to participate in this. It's a volunteer program where the funds from our mission to do it go directly to the Panda Base to fund their projects, which is really cool. And so, yes, you might get to hold a broom like these folks. You also might get to haul bamboo. You also might get to clean up giant panda scat, and there's a lot of that in these as pandas defecate over 100 times a day. Oh, there you go. It could be you. It's a lot of fun. It actually really is. And then once we are done with the giant panda breeding and research bases, we will be heading to what's called the Alps of the East, or Four Sisters National Park. Now, what's really interesting about this is, the eco zones that we travel through, in this trip are fascinating, because when we're up in Xi'an, we're on the north side. We're in what's called northern China, and so it's drier, it's more arid. The Sichuan Basin, or Sichuan province, basically in the mountains that surround the Sichuan Basin, catch a lot of moisture that's coming up from the south, and so you're on the north side of the Qinling Mountains in Xi'an, and it's very dry. It's more of an arid climate. We take the train through the mountains, and we're in um, like this subtropical monsoon at kind of the train level, and then when we go up into the mountains, we start climbing up through temperate zones, and it's super cool, kind of the variety um, that we're going to experience throughout the trip. But then once we kind of finish up at the Dujiangyan Panda Base, and then we're also going to visit Wolong Panda Base, um, or Gangdo Wolong Panda Base. Then we're going to head up this huge kind of switchback road through a 5 kilometer or 3 mile long tunnel, and drop out on the other side into another more arid region. But this time it's going to be at high altitude. So when we go to this area, we'll be staying at about 10,500 feet. It's a Tibetan region as well, so we'll see domestic yaks and a lot of Tibetan architecture, and hear Tibetan music and all that kind of stuff. It's a huge shift from being in the Sichuan Basin, but we'll be at about 10,500 feet is our accommodation, and then when we go into the Four Sisters National Park, we'll be spending a day in there, heading up to the end of this beautiful road filled with rivers, this beautiful valley. It's like 20 miles long, filled with ponds and rivers and creeks and forested hillsides, and then also some extremely tall, jagged mountains, as we are in the foothills of the Himalayas. And the Four Sisters Mountain will be at a viewpoint and hopefully be able to catch a look at it, but it is taller than the tallest mountain in North America. The tallest peak, it's something like 2,000 or 6,251 meters, and I think it tops Denali up in Alaska. And there it is there. That's even just a little bit obscured by cloud, but you can see that the habitat has changed from our lush subtropical and temperate region in Sichuan province. So, or in the Sichuan Basin rather. This is still Sichuan province. So we'll spend 2 nights up here, and we'll spend the full day up the valley exploring around. We can get snow, but usually the snow shows up in the morning, kind of early in the morning. If there's any moisture, it kind of drops in the morning, and then by the afternoon it'll melt away. But it's great for us in particular if you're somebody like me who's into photography, in particular landscape photography in this zone. It's really, really special to kind of see these jagged mountains, the kind of changing weather, just the whole kind of high altitude mountain environment, also contrasting with the Tibetan culture and Tibetan prayer flags. It's a really fun place to explore. Now this section here, I've put a little camera on there because this is just for the photo expedition. So the photo expedition has 2 extra days, and we're going to be going to the Labahe Nature Reserve and Baifangsha Panda Base. This is where we're going to be staying. This hotel nestled up in the mountains. And the idea here is we'll have an additional panda base to explore for our photography purposes, as well as another nature reserve to explore where there's, a possibility of red pandas. There's possibility of more takin and other species, but we will explore around and see what we get, and have an additional 2 days on the photo trip for spending more time in the wild places and at another panda base. That'd be really good. Okay, so everybody, that's the trip. If you're on the regular trip or the nature journey, once we're finished in Four Sisters Mountain National Park, we head out of the mountains through a number of tunnels, and then finish our trip at the Chengdu Joy Hub Hotel. And then the next morning is transfers. Some of you may be doing an extension, some of you may be traveling home, but that's that one. And then um, if you're on the photo expedition, then once we're finished up at the Labaha Nature Reserve and Baifunksha Panda Base, then we will transfer over to the Joy Hub Hotel and on to our next destinations. So just some things to think about. This is where we get into the finer details of the China expedition. Um, I hope you're excited after seeing everything that's to store, and that's just a glimpse of the trip that I can explain in 20 minutes. It is a lot of fun, and it's such a great adventure. So notes on transportation. We are going to be doing all kinds of stuff. From the get-go, there's going to be transfer vehicles to get you from the airport to the Shangri-La in Xi'an. Then we're going to be, on a bus when we go to the Terracotta Army, and then we're going to be transferring to a high-speed train where there's a whole process for getting our luggage and everything on board the train. We're going to be transferring from the train to a bus, and then I put a note there, which is sometimes we have multiple different styles and sizes of buses. So we won't have the same bus through the whole trip because we're making a lot of kind of location transfers. So it's important that what you're packing is movable. It's somewhat versatile and easy for you or for our luggage porters or any of us to manage. And I think that the NatHab pre-departure briefing, just touching on luggage as well, the NatHab pre-departure briefing has some really, really good information. I'm going to mention it a few times, has some really, really good information about what types of luggage make the most sense for this China expedition. So on the last trip, I think we had 3 or 4 different sizes and styles of buses based on where we were and what we were doing. And sometimes we have to transfer, usually not with our check bags, but sometimes we have to transfer with our day packs into a variety of different styles of vehicles. Some of the nature reserves don't let public vehicles drive around, and you have to go in one of their specific nature reserve vehicles. Same with the panda bases. There might be like little shuttles that get us from one corner of the nature or the panda base to the other, and it might be different. So just be prepared for that. There's going to be variety, and I think that that's just a good note for this trip is there's a ton of variety all over the place in everything that we do. There's an example of one of our nice electric vehicles at one of the giant panda bases. We're going to head up. I think this looks like it was Dujiangyan panda base. Kind of these little electric vehicles. Sometimes they're electric. And this is one of our buses that we've had in the past as well. We've had some that are a little bigger, some that are a little smaller. Depends on the group needs. And then our accommodations, super variable throughout the trip. When we start our trip and end our trip, we're at pretty nice kind of big city hotels, right? And all the amenities that can be provided from a city of 10 to 15 million people. They're extremely comfortable and accommodating, and that's they're quite good. The Shangri-La Xi'an is a great place to start the trip, and if you're like me, kind of traveling kind of within a few days before the trip, or right when the trip starts, it's a great place to work out a little bit of jet lag if you've got it. And then when we leave Xi'an, we start to get and we go further afield. We start to get into more remote accommodations, and there's no doubt that these places are doing what they can to make sure that they are comfortable. But some of them, I just want to say, they're simply not set up like the Shangri-La. That we're going to, hotels that are within a nature reserve or high on the Tibetan, like kind of higher in the Tibetan region, in areas where, because of the nature of the trip, we want to be off the beaten track. The accommodation is also off the beaten track, and that means that we won't be seeing the Shangri-La Xi'an level of hospitality, or hospitality is probably the wrong word. Just that standard, we're gonna have some very, very nice kind of further afield accommodation. And when I changed the word hospitality because where we go, the people running the facilities are extremely accommodating and extremely hospitable, and will do everything they can to make our trip as comfortable as possible. And our local partners have been working with and know either the owners or managers or staff on hand pretty well, and so we have a really good setup with all the locations that we go to. So the most important thing is the accommodation suits our needs, and we pick accommodation based on the location that we want to be. And so we're taking the best possible accommodation within striking distance of a location that we want to be at and experience. And as well, something that has changed from previous years on this itinerary. Last year it was the same, but most hotel stays, excuse me, are for 2 nights. So I've done some expeditions where we've had 6 days where we just change hotel, change hotel, change hotel, and we're all worn out halfway through the trip. And so this is really nice because it means when we get to a hotel, we can usually settle in for a little bit and then move on to the next one and let us really at our pace explore the area. So that's really nice. Now, notes on physical requirements. All of the walks that we do throughout the trip are extremely varying in length. I would say, 2 miles minimum per day is what we'll be walking. Sometimes, that's going to look like we'll do 500 yards for one place, and then, a mile at another place, and then another 500 yards at another place. But we try to mix up the walks. There's, some of the train stations transfers are quite big. Walking out of the Terracotta Army it's got to be a mile at least just to get out of that site. It's so huge. And then, when we're in the nature reserves, we're going to be exploring either some like these old dirt roads, or we'll be taking some walks. And what I would say is like there's, the mixture of trails and everything that we're going to do. We're going to be doing dirt trails. We're going to be doing paved trails. We're going to be doing gravel trails. We're going to be doing boardwalks. We're going to be doing stairs. And, depending on what the weather has thrown our way, there might be a little bit of mud on the trails. We could be walking in the rain. We could be doing all these kinds of things. And so this trip, definitely you have a lot of time on your feet. And with kind of inverse of that, we also have some long travel and transition days where we have to spend, 4 to 6 hours traveling to get from one place to another. We try to, when we have that, we try not to do it in one go. We try to, make some stops, or at least get out and stretch our legs somewhere and explore something interesting, because everywhere there's something interesting here. But definitely, it's kind of a combination of we'll have some days where we're spending a lot of time on our feet, and we're moving around one area, exploring one area as much as we can, and then we'll transition. We'll have a bit of a longer travel day, or a transitional day where we're in the bus for a number of hours, and that's that we have long days. Oftentimes we're kind of departing before 8 o'clock, and then sometimes we're kind of not wrapping up until after dinner around 9 p.m. So we want to make this trip as much as it can be for you, and but at the same time, have some don't wear you out completely, so that you can still enjoy things halfway through the trip. And then, of course, something that's come up on past trips is folks have wanted more strenuous walks than what are offered. And I will tell you now, there's no shortage of hills or stairs to climb in the areas, the mountainous regions of China where we're going. So if that's something that you require, just talk to your expedition leader, and we'll see what we can set up for you, or kind of point you in the right direction of a great place to walk and explore. There's some walks that are, you just go 2,000 feet up a flight of stairs basically, and that's not for everybody, but it's for some. And then another really, really important piece of this, folks, is notes on food and dietary. The food is amazing. Um, Sichuan province in particular is well known for its cuisine, and throughout the trip, we're going to be trying all kinds of different types of food. Our local guide, whether our local guide basically is going to be kind of working with me and with everybody to make sure that we're putting food in front of us that makes the most sense. And is we're so that we're trying new things and we're also not just having a plate full of chilies every night. We want to make sure that everyone's enjoying the food and the cuisine, and so we'll be focusing on that. We'll have a good variety, lots of vegetables, lots of the mushrooms are really popular. Some wild vegetables if you're up for it. Regional specialties. It seems like every hour or two down the road, kind of there's a new specialty for the region. And then, something that has often come up is spice and heat on food. And so there's definitely that's why I have this picture of everything that's kind of slightly red on here. But it's there's a lot of spices. There's a lot of chilies incorporated into a lot of meals. And if you are somebody who doesn't like spice, make sure you tell us because we can definitely accommodate that, and we've been doing it for years. So the most important thing is for us to get an idea ahead of time is just make sure that your dietary that you've submitted to NatHab is as up to date as possible. Um, in particular, if we're going to be heading into some of these more remote areas, like that, we'll be 8 hours by road from a grocery store that we could get kind of familiar familiar amenities. So it's really important that we know ahead of time so that we can plan to have those things with us when we kind of head into the field. So just make sure you've got the most up-to-date dietary info with us, please, beforehand. But we'll work with you to make sure that you've got everything you need. We've always got snacks with us wherever we're going. We usually have a little hamper picnic basket that's filled with snacks, and then breakfast is usually at the hotel where we're staying. Sometimes we have to bring breakfast with us because we want to start earlier than the open breakfast is, and we also want to provide things kind of things like coffee and cereal and granola and that kind of stuff, things that are more of a familiar breakfast food to start the day. And then, yeah, we'll do lunch and we'll do dinner throughout the day. But yes, please update your dietary. And then when it comes to packing and gear, again, I'm going to point out the pre-departure briefing. Keep it simple. And it's not a bad idea to um, try out your layers and try out your rain gear. A waterproof outer layer is important. In particular, I did mention one of the eco zones we're going to is a subtropical monsoon climate, which means that periodically throughout the year there can be a lot of rain. It's not often that we get rained on hard, but when it does and we still want to do stuff, it's great to have. It's probably going to be pretty warm. It might be around 60 to 70, but also raining. So it's not a bad idea to have a good rain jacket and some rain pants, and then some comfortable hiking shoes. Even better if they are also waterproof. Um, yeah, and layers is nice. Like I'll tell you, for most of the days that we are in the Sichuan Basin or in Xi'an, I'm usually wearing kind of a lighter shirt, lighter long sleeve shirt or short sleeve shirt, and then I have my windbreaker with me just in case the temperature drops a bit. And then when we're in the mountains, I'm usually wearing kind of a similar lighter shirt, and then a fleece, and then a rain jacket. Um, I'm going to bring like a little down puffy jacket with me that will kind of be my mountain attire. And then when we're up in Four Sisters Mountain National Park, it'll be a little bit colder, so I would recommend um, you know having like that a down puffy or a decent weight fleece for that time up there because it can be a little bit cool. Um, But with that being said, when it comes to what type of backpack to bring or what type of kit to bring with you, what I would say is try to keep it simple so that you have like, one solid day pack that you bring with you. This is the one that's going to be in and out of vehicles all day, every day. Um, and if it's got your camera equipment, I've got my one camera bag, and then just try to keep it to one bag because I think that'll like one bag that you have with you on your person throughout the day. You can do whatever you need to come to China. But um, yeah, it's nice to kind of keep it simple and organized. And at the welcome dinner, your expedition leader is going to give you kind of a list of things that they're going to want to see in the day pack um, as well, which is all it's all on that pre-departure briefing list. It's just what's nice to have with you throughout each day. And then, folks, let's talk about photography. So, some of you are going on the photo expedition, and I like to say, the classic one is the best camera you have is the one you have with you. I like to be pretty versatile. So what I'm bringing for my kit is I'm going to have my main camera body. I'm going to have my wide angle lens, a 12 to 24. I'll have a 24 to 70 or a mid-range lens, and then I'll have a telephoto 100 to 400 or something. And that I believe all this information is in the pre-departure briefing as well. If you're thinking about bringing a tripod, if you have a tripod that you love that fits within your luggage requirements and you've been using it for years and it's just, it's something really great that you enjoy to have with you, definitely bring that with you. It just depends on what you're expecting to use it for. There may be some opportunity for a little bit of night photography. There may be some opportunity for a little bit of river photography or like moving water photography. And so if you want to be able to have a tripod to set your camera down and do slow down your shutter speed, then that's a good idea. But we're going to have a few with us on the trip or in different areas of the trip when the tripods make the most sense. But it's very much up to you. What you want to do there. I've had lots of people come on the trip who said, you know what, I probably didn't need a tripod for this one. And then I've had lots of people on the trip who said, I'm glad I had the tripod for the two shots, kind of thing. But it depends on your personal photography style and what you want to focus your energy on. There, but we will have some with us that we can kind of have with us for some parts of the trip. And then, folks, this is just a little pro tip from me, which is something I find 100% necessary nowadays. Is however you're carrying your camera, we're going to be on the move a lot. You might want to have your camera with you, hanging from your neck, hanging off your shoulder for 8 to 10 hours of the day. So what I would suggest is a nice, comfortable camera strap or something like that that keeps your camera accessible, ready to go, but also you very comfortable. And so I've got this chest harness that I plug my camera in here, and I just always have it with me. It's got a little rain cover. I find that super helpful. It keeps my hands free if we're walking over some challenging terrain, or I need to offer somebody a hand, or use binoculars or something like that. Another pro tip is a small microfiber towel. We're talking like 2 feet wide, 3 feet wide, a towel, little microfiber towel. And what I use that for is, let's say we're out and we get like a little, a short burst of rain come down for 5 minutes, which is super frequent in the mountains. And now my camera is wet, and I don't really want my camera to be wet for the whole day, or my binoculars have raindrops on them or something like that. I've got, I have the little lens cloths, but those just get saturated instantly. So what I like to bring is a little microfiber towel. It just lives in a pocket. And then when I get a little bit of moisture, fog, condensation, whatever onto the camera, I can quickly dry it off, wipe it off. And it's big enough that it actually dries the camera off. It's super, super handy. And I have lent out mine almost more than I've used it, but you know what I mean? It's very, very handy and helpful, especially if there's, just a little bit of environmental moisture landing on your camera equipment or binoculars. Um, Other than that, everybody, photography wise, it's going to be so varied on this trip. We're going to be, in cities, so we'll be doing, there might be some kind of city and town uh, photography, portraits, that kind of stuff. If you're photographing people, make sure you get permission first, of course. Um, there's just interesting, different things throughout the country that we're going to be seeing. There's lots of landscape opportunities, in particular in the Giant Panda Nature Reserve and in Four Sisters Mountain National Park, and some of those places that we're going to. Just really really special, beautiful forests. Um, Depending on what kind of lighting we're getting and everything. But it's a really spectacular place to explore. And then, focusing in on some of the cultural aspects is interesting too. There's mountains and snow. And then there's also wildlife. So, it's I almost find that wildlife is what like I love doing the wildlife photography. Um, and I would never want to be 100% wildlife on this trip because the landscape opportunities are so unique and so special as well. It's like I just wish that I could take photos with both hands at the same time. You know what I mean? It's really really cool. Great opportunities for up close and personal shots with the golden snub-nosed monkeys. And we're going in the spring, and so that means it's wildflower season. There's the Chinese redbud on here, which is uh, going to be in the Giant Panda Nature Reserve right around the blooming time when we get there. And then rhododendrons as well will be at some of the higher altitudes, as well as numerous other wildflowers. And one of the really awesome things about where we're going, there's in kind of the same region that we're going to, it's something like there's 4,000 different species of plants and animals. Um, Many of which are endemic based on the surrounding area, and many of which myself, the rangers, and our local guides, when a flower shows up, sometimes they can show up in the same area year after year. Sometimes they just show up randomly from seeds that have been dropped. But chances are you're looking at something pretty special whenever we find a little wildflower on the side of the trail or something like that. It's really cool. It's just beautiful. Oh, this one's a fun one. We saw Tibetan macaque with a baby jumping across a racing river in the Giant Panda Nature Reserve. That's something special. And then again on the right hand side there, you've got the red buds over a glacial, or not a mountain stream rather. Red panda, and this one's in a giant panda nature base. Giant panda, giant panda nature base, and it's a great trip. It's a lot of fun. There's so much variety, and I hope that after watching this presentation, you're very excited and a little bit more prepared. But I'll pass it over to you, Rob.
All right, Eddie, thank you so much. All right, so before we dive into the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. Just go to the upper right corner and click on those three bars and go to questions and put them in there. All right, so let's grab some of these questions. Um, when we're walking up to see the golden snub-nosed monkeys, is that going to be a hard walk or is that a moderate walk, would you say?
So up to the golden snub-nosed monkeys, that is distance-wise, let's call it a little bit under a mile. But it's a steady uphill boardwalk with some steps. So it's not like we're, zigzagging down or up a narrow switchback trail or anything like that. It's just a steady incline on a boardwalk with handrails and steps.
Gotcha, thank you. So let's talk about mosquitoes for a second. Are we going to have to worry about them in China? Are there going to be a lot of them to deal with?
I mean, I would personally say I haven't had much trouble with mosquitoes in particular. There's definitely going to be a wide variety of insects and bugs. you know, I can't say that I've been bitten since I've there. It's not something that kind of pops into my head as something that I've had to deal with. But what I would say is, if you've got an insect repellent that you want to bring with you, that doesn't hurt, but it's not so bad.
Great, thank you so much. What about washing our clothes? Will there be any opportunities to do that along the way?
That one, because we're staying at hotels for 2 nights, um, that's sometimes not quite enough. In particular, the places that we're staying at when we head into the nature reserves, um, you know, they will say, yes, hey, we'll take your laundry, but then they actually have to drive it back to town, do the laundry in town, and then drive it back to us. And sometimes that just takes longer than we're in one place. So if at all possible, pack so that we're not having to utilize laundry services along the way. If it becomes a desperate situation, uh, I'm sure we can figure something out. We have places along the way that it might be a little bit more expedited, like in Dujingyan, around day 8, 9, something like that. But yeah, I'm gonna try to pack so that I won't have to do laundry until I'm set and ready to go home.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. So let me ask you this. Will there be scopes and phone adapters for photography?
Yeah, so when we are in areas that make sense to have a scope, we are going to have a scope with us. So in particular, the Giant Panda Nature Reserve will have a scope with us there. That's kind of our big um, wildlife kind of opportunity is those 2 to 3 days that we're spending there. As far as a cell phone adapter, I'm not sure actually if we've got one of those, have those with us. Um, I'm gonna make a note of that because I know that they're easy enough to get. A cell phone adapter for scope. Yeah, so I'm not sure what we got as far as a cell phone adapter for scope, but
Great.
I'm sure if it was necessary, we could pick some up pretty easily.
Gotcha. Thank you. And what about charging our electronic devices? Will we have any issues doing that during the trip? Do we need any special adapters?
Um, so it's you're definitely going to need a travel adapter when it comes to your like so the sorry the amps or the voltage or whatever. It is 220 over there. So things like razors and that kind of thing, um, or hair dryers, they might have a little bit of a different time. So you might want a voltage converter for that. Um, However, most cell phone chargers and computer chargers, it'll say right on there that it does 110 and 220. Um, and then with that, the plug outlet is a European style plug outlet. Or sorry, not European. It's for uh, China. And I wish I had a picture to show you. I should have had one in the slideshow. But uh, a lot of hotels, surprisingly, have the North American two-prong outlet. But what I've done in the past is I've brought a little kind of power bar with me that I can plug in and extend my charging capabilities to with North American ones. So you will need the adapter. I'm sure I can find have to make a note of that one too to send it to you. But I know that it's in the pre-departure briefing.
Perfect. Thank you, Eddie.
Yeah.
So when we're out hiking and away from the vehicles, are they going to be secure enough that we could leave our extra camera lenses or bags in there if we don't want to bring stuff with us?
Yeah, 100%.
Excellent. That is so good to know. Um, so, do you have any advice on the days that we're traveling at high altitude? Is there anything I can do to help fight altitude sickness?
So the way that I understand altitude sickness is basically it can affect people of any age, any fitness. Um, it's invariably random. when it hits. For example, the first time I went to the Four Sisters Mountain National Park, I did not get any altitude issues. And then the second time I went, or I think it was actually the third or fourth time I went last year, I did. And we don't stay at altitude long enough to have any. Uh, we're not at like very, very high altitude. We're right at the bottom edge of like high altitude, and so we don't stay long enough to have uh, any severe long-term effects. And essentially, if you have altitude sickness, the best cure is to just go to a lower altitude. If there was an emergency situation and we needed to go, we could. Otherwise, there are a variety of medications out there. I'm not going to consult you on which ones to get. That one is something you'd want to talk to your doctor or travel doctor about for altitude. Um, but yeah, we're staying at the hotel for 2 nights. We arrive in the afternoon and then we leave the second morning. So our stay is 48 hours, and I've definitely seen a few people throughout the years. Maybe they're a little bit more lethargic, or they just want to sleep a bit more. But things that we can prepare on a day-to-day basis is get enough sleep, drink a lot of water, and keep a full belly, and just try to kind of not overdo it physically throughout the day as well. So, if you want to go for a jog at 11,000 feet, that's probably a good way to set off altitude sickness. But essentially, once we're up there, we just slow down and and try to stay comfortable and healthy and let our bodies adjust to it.
Great. Thanks for the advice. So let's talk about pandas for just a second. Do you know if there are any issues with wild pandas not accepting the pandas introduced by breeding facilities?
Yeah, I mean it's complex. There was one panda in particular that I talk about quite often because it was the first one that they released back into the wild, and they had a tracking collar on it, and they found the panda after around a year in the wild. It had been killed, and they suspect it was killed by another panda. Um, and so one of the things with reintroduction is, you know, how are humans to know everything that female pandas or mama pandas are teaching their cubs? All of those nuanced lessons that they learned from generations of mother bears, spanning thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. So those lessons are definitely hard to learn. So they think what likely happened is, this panda was released. It had spent time in captivity. It had likely been accustomed to humans slightly. It had likely been accustomed to the smell of lots of other bears around. I think a key one is a smell, and maybe was a little bit more of a social panda than uh, pandas are expected to be in the wild. And so that's kind of the theory, is that this panda was maybe approaching too close to another panda, didn't get the warning signs, and was then therefore attacked and unfortunately killed. So one of the things that they've done now, that the bases are doing now to kind of combat that, is any pandas that are being released into the wild, they're working to have them spend time with a wild mother. So a wild caught female bear. And that way, that female is going to be teaching kind of those age-old lessons, the nuanced lessons to those cubs. And there have been successful reintroductions. I think the last number I heard was 8. I'd have to go and get that updated pretty quick. But yeah, that's it. It's a work in progress, and it's exciting to kind of see the direction that it's going.
Great. Thank you for that answer. Are there any extensions that NatHab offers on this trip? Any other places that we should go when we're out there?
There is an extension. There's an extension to the Beijing extension, an additional few days after the trip. I think there's details of that on the NatHub China webpage, for the Beijing extension, or you can talk to your adventure specialist about it. But there is it's 2 or 3 days. I can't remember. I haven't done it myself. I'm usually going on an expedition right away. So.
Well, let me ask you this, Eddie. You've been to China. Is there anything that you've experienced that really surprised you the most?
Oh my gosh. Um, you know, I think I think that one of my that surprised me the most. I can't say the word most because I feel like there's so many different things that have surprised me. But I think one of the most or the something that really resonated with me was kind of going into some of these wild spaces and getting to meet the people that are kind of either working in the nature reserves or working in the panda bases and kind of seeing how much love, care, and compassion there is for wildlife and for natural spaces, as well as uh, kind of just a general welcoming and uh, yeah, a general welcoming of the people that we meet along the way, whether that's in small villages, cities, restaurants, or wherever. It kind of seemed like yeah, it's just uh, a very welcoming people and a very welcoming country and a very uh, passionate group of people working in the places that we're visiting. It's pretty cool.
Great. Thank you, Eddie. Tell me, can you give us the title of your book again and maybe tell us where we could pick one up?
Yeah, sure. My book, it's called Wild Bears of Canada. And if you go to wildbearsofcanada.com or look up Wild Bears of Canada book on Google, it should come up. And I've got it available in my store, and I've got my office is blurred out behind me because it's all boxes and shipping material right now.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, Eddie, so much. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for some closing comments.
Uh, Thank you, Rob. Folks, thanks for tuning in. It's been a real pleasure to get to share this trip with you. You know, something that I love about this is whenever I'm building a presentation or preparing a webinar, um, you know, I haven't been there in a year, but now I'm like, you know, I can't wait to get there. I'm extremely excited to explore such a beautiful place with beautiful people and beautiful wildlife. Um, yeah, I'm totally thrilled to see you over there, and I hope you're as excited as I am. Thank you.
And Eddie, thank you so much for taking that time to present for us today. And I'd also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you are interested in information on how you can travel to China with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917 or send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. If you're part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. Join us Monday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude today's webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.